Welcome to the deep dive. So, when many of us hear first fruits, images probably pop into mind, right? Harvest, maybe bringing something from the fields, perhaps even, financial giving.
Very seasonal.
Exactly. Seasonal, maybe feels a bit comfortable, perhaps a little abstract from our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, something you observe at a certain time.
Well, today we're going to take those common ideas and, well, pretty much set them aside entirely.
Okay, a different direction then.
A very different direction. Our source material for this deep dive, it comes from a really profound perceptual lesson. This was delivered by Elder Michael Johnson, who's a Master Hebraist of biblical law.
Right.
The core teaching is called, get this, the altar of honest examination and purification.
That already sounds intense, not just giving.
Exactly. And for you, listening right now, our mission, our goal here is to try and understand first fruits not as some kind of ritual of prosperity or harvest festival, but as a covenantal summons to honest examination.
A summons. That's strong language. It immediately elevates the standard, doesn't it? It's quite arresting, actually.
It is.
This material, it insists that this specific season, this designated time, is actually a period of serious spiritual reckoning.
Reckoning. Okay.
Yeah, where the soul itself is put under a kind of deep internal audit. It's where your heart, your inner being is weighed, it's tested, and ultimately it's refined.
Mm-hmm.
And refined specifically in the fire of Jehovah's law.
Wow. So not just a casual check-in.
Not at all. And the requirement articulated here, it sounds simple, but it's actually incredibly challenging. It's about confronting the inward state.
The inward.
The absolute unvarnished truth of your heart. Not the outward show, not the piety or success that, the world might see and applaud. Is what's really going on inside.
That really sets the stage for a potentially dramatic internal confrontation, doesn't it? If this is a covenantal summons, like you said, and we're talking about a spiritual reckoning, then this whole journey requires us to approach something called an altar. And this altar, according to the source, demands the slaughter of something internal.
Something deeply internal.
Yeah. So we're not just, checking a box, performing some religious duty. It feels more like we're being called to perform deep, maybe even painful spiritual surgery on ourselves.
That's a very apt way to put it. Surgery on the soul.
Okay, so let's unpack the offering itself then. If it's not just crops, what is it? When we think historically about first fruits, we usually default to, the literal earliest crops, the first and best from the field.
It's a traditional view. Yeah.
Right. But what does this perceptual source material insist is the true offering, the one that's actually required during this sacred season?
This is where the shift is fundamental.
Yeah.
We have to move our focus completely away from agriculture, away from produce, and onto action, onto our lives.
Okay.
The source material really emphasizes that first fruits is specifically designated for this profound spiritual offering of what they term first works. That's the core principle here, first works.
First works. Okay, what does that entail?
Well, think about it. It requires you to bring forth the first and the best portion, not of your land, necessarily, or your bank account, but the first and best of your heart.
Your heart.
Your energy, your mind, your focus, your very life, and present that before Jehovah. It's about the first, the foremost, the primary expression of your devotion and action.
And the quality of this first works offering, I'm guessing it's not negotiable. It has to be authentic.
Absolutely non-negotiable. The sources use very specific, quite powerful spiritual legal language to define the kind of authenticity that's required.
Okay.
The offering must be, and this is a direct quote, an authentic, unvarnished truth.
Unvarnished truth.
And they actually break that truth down into three essential non-negotiable components. You need doctrine, you need faithfulness, and you need certainty of the law.
Okay, let's pause on those three for a second. Doctrine, faithfulness, certainty of the law. These aren't just abstract ideas here, are they? They sound like actual measurements. How do they connect in this first fruits offering?
They're absolutely measurements. Think about it like this. If your works, your actions are the offering,
right,
then doctrine is like the blueprint. It's the sound foundation of truth that your life is built upon. It ensures your works actually line up with Jehovah's instructions, not just your own good ideas.
Got it, the blueprint.
Then faithfulness.
Yeah.
That's the constant application. It's the steadfastness, the persistence in adhering to that blueprint day in, day out. It ensures the devotion isn't just a flash in the pan, but something consistent.
Okay, consistency.
And finally, certainty of the law. This is the legal commitment. It's understanding and actually applying the covenantal statutes. It proves that your actions are being measured against Jehovah's objective standard, not just, human feelings or good intentions.
Wow.
Anything less than the fusion of those three sound doctrine, consistent faithfulness and commitment to the law, is basically deemed pretense. It dishonors the covenant.
So just showing up with the offering, the first works, it immediately becomes an act of self-disclosure. You're showing your hand, spiritually speaking. Now, you mentioned the law. Let's look at the ancient ritual described there that seems to reinforce this idea of motion, of living proof. We read the instruction in Leviticus 23:10-11. The priest has to wave the sheaf of firstfruits before Jehovah for it to be accepted.
The wave offering.
Right. What's the spiritual truth being pulled out of that physical action?
It's profound, really. The interpretation here is that our first fruits, our first works, must be presented in motion.
In motion.
Yeah. It can't be a static thing you just drop on the altar and walk away from. It has to be an active, moving demonstration, essentially a life lived out as a testimony.
So if your faith isn't active, if it isn't moving and visible in your actual deeds, your first works, it can't really be waved before the Creator.
That's precisely the understanding. It needs that dynamic quality. And this connects directly to the next really critical jump in understanding from the source material.
Okay.
It goes beyond just the offering you bring and makes a stunning declaration.
Yeah.
The followers themselves are the offering.
We are the offering.
Yes.
Yeah.
They quote Jeremiah 2:3. Israel was holiness unto the Lord, and the first fruits of his increase.
Okay, I see the connection.
This isn't just seen as a historical note about ancient Israel. It's presented as a statement of identity and purpose for all followers within the covenant.
Right.
And when the source material breaks down the spiritual meaning of first fruits in this context, referring to the people,
Yeah.
the definitions given are very specific. Heir, preeminence, foremost, first works.
Heir, preeminence, foremost, first works.
So we're defined as the foremost creation, the heir of the promise, which means we are called to actually be the first works of Jehovah's spiritual harvest.
Exactly. That establishes a fundamental precept here. We are called to be living firstfruits. We are meant to be vessels that have willingly submitted to this required examination, this refinement, this testing. We're not just people who give an annual offering out of whatever surplus we might have. The offering is the life itself, presented continuously, in motion, embodying that unvarnished truth, doctrine, faithfulness, certainty of the law. And the implication is stark. If we are flawed and unexamined.
Then the offering, the life lived, is rejected. The vessel has to be fit for use.
Yeah. Okay, this is getting really interesting. So the destination for this covenantal summons, this place where the offering happens, is the altar. Now, if we accept that we're not bringing an animal or, a sheaf of barley,
Right.
what exactly does the source define this altar as, and what kind of transaction is really taking place there?
The spiritual definition of the altar given here is quite visceral. It's powerful. While it is, yes, the offering table,
Okay.
it's also explicitly defined as the place of slaughter. And that carries the core meaning, to slay.
That's slay. Okay, that's direct. Slay what?
Well, this is where it gets personal. What's being slain are the internal beasts, so to speak, the things that ruin the vessel from the inside out. Specifically named are pride, pretense, and self-deception.
Pride, pretense, self-deception. The internal beasts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to approach this altar of honest examination, it means you have to come with the intent to eliminate these corrupting influences. You have to be willing to lay the soul bare, ready for these things to be, slain.
Let's spend a moment on those beasts. Pride. We can sort of define that abstractly. But how does the source material suggest it shows up in the daily life of a follower, making it something that needs to be actively slain?
That's a great question. Pride in this specific context isn't just arrogance in general. It's defined more precisely as the refusal to submit your actions, your motivations, even your successes, to external correction or to Jehovah's standard.
Ah, okay. Resisting correction.
Yes, it's that constant need for self-justification. I did it this way because, or you don't understand my circumstances, that kind of thing.
Right.
Then pretense. That's the performance aspect. It's maintaining that outward show of piety, of having it all together, of righteousness. Well, internally, the foundation might be crumbling. You're acting the part.
Mask?
The mask, precisely. And self-deception. Well, this one might be the most insidious, because it's the comfortable lie we tell ourselves.
Oh, so.
It's what prevents us from even seeing the cracks in our own spiritual cistern, to use an analogy we'll get to later.
Right.
We convince ourselves everything's fine. All three, the resistance to correction, the mask, and the self-told lie, they have to be brutally confronted and slain on this altar before any real spiritual progress can even begin.
Wow. Okay. So the examination itself is an act of intense, really disciplined self-confrontation. The source calls this observance a reckoning, and it echoes that incredibly powerful plea from Lamentations 3:40. Let us search and try our ways and turn again to the Lord.
Exactly. And the spiritual function, the deep meaning of that word search is absolutely key here.
How so? What does search mean in this context?
It doesn't mean a casual glance inward or, some light introspection over coffee. The source defines it using words like examine, inquire, investigation, look for, seek. Yes. And it specifically compares it to the hard labor of searching for precious metals buried in the earth.
Like mining.
Precisely. It's an intensive, focused excavation. You are digging deep through the layers of dross, your daily habits, your hidden thoughts, your real intentions, striving to unearth that truth in the inward parts that King David prayed for so desperately in Psalm 51:6.
That paints a picture of a very high-stakes internal audit. Okay, so if this deep spiritual excavation happens, the purpose, ultimately, is purification. How does that purification actually occur according to the source?
It happens precisely by confronting those shadows within, the hidden sins, the compromises, the things that quietly bind the heart, often things we've convinced ourselves are acceptable or maybe too small to really matter.
Things we sweep under the rug.
Exactly. And this purification process, it's explicitly likened to a fining pot or a crucible.
A crucible, like
Yeah.
for metalworking.
Yes. The terms used are refiner's fire, purification, trial, proving ground. It immediately brings to mind passages like Zechariah 13:9.
Right.
And I will bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried.
Okay, when we talk about refining silver or gold, we need to understand the physical process to really grasp the spiritual impact, right? What actually happens in that crucible that makes the fire so necessary?
Well, when a silversmith wants to purify raw metal, they heat it intensely, right, to incredibly high temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this intense heat, it doesn't burn the precious silver away. That's not the goal. Instead, the heat forces all the impurities, the lead, the sulfur, the copper, all the unwanted stuff, the dross, it forces it to rise to the surface.
Where it can be removed.
Exactly. Where the refiner can carefully skim it off, leaving the pure silver behind. The fire is absolutely essential for that separation.
Okay, that brings up what the source calls a crucial insight from this perceptual lesson then. This spiritual fire, this examination, it doesn't destroy the devoted follower. Its purpose is actually to distinguish.
Precisely. To distinguish the pure from the dross. It separates the genuine, the faithful desire for JEHOVAH from all the arrogance, the self-justification, the hypocrisy that we, inevitably accumulate in our lives.
So the refining process is really about separation and elevation. It's not about annihilation.
Not at all. It makes the living firstfruits offering us acceptable. It prepares the vessel.
Okay, so the source material now shifts gears a bit. It moves from these abstract principles of examination and fire to a really powerful narrative illustration, one what it calls the dark speeches or parables.
These similitudes are very potent.
Let's look closely at the similitude of the broken cisterns because it seems to perfectly illustrate the devastating cost of resisting that refining fire, of refusing that internal audit we just talked about.
It really does. This parable, it centers on a man who is incredibly skilled, a master cistern maker.
Okay.
His skill wasn't just average. It was refined over 40 long years of undeniable success. He was the most sought-after craftsman in the entire region. Everyone wanted his work.
40 years of success, that's a long time.
A very long time. But with that duration of success, that constant affirmation, came a profound spiritual danger. The slow poisoning of pride. And the source material explicitly connects his downfall, his trajectory, to King Uzziah's spiritual path, mentioned in 2 Chronicles 26:16. It reminds us that Uzziah became strong, he was successful, but once he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction.
So success itself became the snare.
In this case, yes. The cistern maker's strength, his undeniable skill, ironically became his greatest spiritual weakness. It fed his pride.
So 40 years of basically unchallenged success built up this huge edifice of pride. What happens next in the story?
Well, he undertakes his greatest project yet. He decides to build his finest, most magnificent cistern. This was meant to be his legacy, the one that would immortalize his name and reputation.
His masterpiece.
Exactly. But during its construction, something catastrophic happened. A flaw appeared. the vessel cracked.
Mm.
And spiritually, this crack represented more than just faulty clay. It symbolized a foundational failure in his adherence, perhaps, to the law, or maybe a hidden character flaw, an unexamined sin that was now manifesting physically in the work of his hands.
So the internal problem showed up externally.
Precisely. And his pride, that 40-year edifice, dictated his response.
What did he do?
Instead of confessing the imperfection, acknowledging the failure, instead of seeking counsel, maybe humbling himself and tearing down the flawed cistern to rebuild it on a truthful foundation,
Yeah.
he did none of that. He simply mixed up some external compound, some cosmetic fix, and covered the flaw with clay. He patched it over.
He hid it.
He hid it. Because he believed his reputation, the outward show of perfection, was infinitely more important than the actual truth of the vessel's internal integrity.
Wow. That is the absolute essence of self-deception, isn't it? Prioritizing how things look over how they are, and the consequence. It wasn't just that one hidden crack failing, was it? The story doesn't end there.
No, not at all. Because the source emphasizes that Jehovah sees in secret. It references Hebrews 4:13. Nothing is hidden from his sight. And so Jehovah allowed the judgment, the consequence of that hidden deception, to spread.
Spread how?
The source states that all his other vessel cisterns he had built during this period of unexamined success and growing pride, they began to fail too. One by one, they started cracking, leaking.
So the hidden pride, the covered flaw in that one great work somehow contaminated his entire body of works.
That's the teaching. It mirrors a spiritual judgment where hidden sin, unrepented failure covered by pride, affects all the labor built upon that flawed foundation. It spreads like a contagion.
That's a chilling spiritual analogy. So what exactly does the broken cistern represent in us, in the follower listening right now?
It represents the unexamined soul. The person who appears perfectly whole, maybe even righteous or successful on the outside.
Okay.
Maybe they're successful in their career. Maybe they're renowned for charitable works. Maybe they never miss a religious service. They look great. But inwardly, the vessel is cracked. And it's leaking the very essence it's supposed to hold and deliver, maybe the Holy Spirit, the life-giving water of truth.
Yeah.
It can't fulfill its purpose.
Which means that the entire body of works, and the source defines works as labor, deeds, actions, fruit, everything, built upon this underlying hidden deception. It's ultimately destined to just collapse.
It must collapse. The
Right.
perceptual lesson is very clear on this. Jehovah will not accept a vessel that's just patched up by vanity, by prideful concealment. That hidden pride, that refusal to undergo the inquire, question, search phase we talked about, it corrodes every single labor that comes after that deception began. The cistern maker's real failure wasn't the initial crack flaws happened. His failure was the willful, prideful decision to conceal it.
That makes the similitude, this parable, such a stark and immediate warning, doesn't it?
Right.
Against prioritizing our public reputation, how people see us over our internal truth, our actual state before Jehovah.
Absolutely.
It forces us, really, to engage with that critical question, the one echoed in the warning from salvation of Jehovah in Mark 8:36. What does it profit a person if they manage to gain the whole world of reputation, if they keep up that perfect outward show, but they lose their own soul in the process because the internal vessel was fundamentally broken and never made whole?
Exactly. And the source ties this back directly to the perceptual law concerning self-reliance and trusting in human solutions over Jehovah's truth. Jeremiah 17:5 states, "Cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord."
Trusting his own cover-up.
Precisely. The cistern maker trusted his own skill, his own ability to conceal his flaw from other people, rather than submitting himself and his flawed work to Jehovah's truth and the necessary correction. The source material is absolutely definitive here. Pride goes before destruction, just as the master craftsman's most celebrated works ultimately failed because they lacked that truthful, examined foundation. It cites Proverbs 16:18 directly.
Okay. This deep dive, it's designed to be practical, to be actionable for you listening. If we understand the danger of being a broken cistern, how do we actually do this? How do we practically approach this process of honest examination? Thankfully, the sources move beyond just the philosophy, and they outline 4 specific, quite challenging, but non-negotiable steps for the worshiper.
Yes, and the first step is arguably the most challenging, but it's absolutely foundational, because it involves the altar's primary function that we discussed earlier: slaying pride.
Slaying pride. Step 1.
Step 1. The altar demands the death of self-glorification. It demands the silencing of self-deception. and it demands the absolute refusal to constantly justify ourselves.
So this slaughter we talked about, it's not just figurative language.
It's presented as the necessary death of the ego, the part of us that insists we are sufficient on our own, that we don't need continuous correction or examination. The source is quite unambiguous. Pride cannot stand where the blood, meaning the shedding of our own self-will, our self-importance, is poured out. This has to happen first. It's the necessary precursor for any acceptable offering to even be considered.
Okay, a very high bar to start. Once that groundwork of humility is laid, or at least attempted, what's the second practical step? You mentioned it relates to our focus.
Exactly. The second step is highly practical and, frankly, measurable. Examining devotions. Specifically examining where the first portion of our lives is actually directed.
The first portion, what does that mean specifically?
It means we have to honestly determine what receives the foremost beginning primary portion of our most valuable resources. That means our time, our physical strength when we're freshest, our intellectual energy, our spiritual thought life.
So not just what's left over.
Definitely not. This is the true gauge of our dedication. It forces the follower, it forces you to look honestly at your schedule, at your bank statement, at where your mental energy goes, and ask, where does the first, the best, the unspent energy really go? Is JEHOVAH getting the prime cut or the leftovers?
And the standard here, it sounds incredibly high, maybe even uncomfortably high for many of us. The source actually cites Malachi 1, 7, and 8, and it provides a pretty harsh metric for judging our devotion, doesn't it?
It does. It's stark. The warning in Malachi is that if JEHOVAH receives only the scraps, the tired leftovers after the world, our jobs, our hobbies, our social lives, even our own fleshly desires have already feasted, then the offering isn't just less than ideal, it's condemned as filthy.
Filthy, that's strong. How is filthy defined here?
The spiritual definition provided is powerful. Unclean, defiled, impure rags. It's considered defiled not just because it's low quality, but because the motivation behind giving the leftovers is seen as one of mere convenience or maybe reluctant obligation rather than primary, wholehearted devotion. The offering must come from what is, first, deliberately reserved and set apart, not just what's conveniently left over at the end of the day or week.
Okay, so slay pride, examine where the first of everything goes. What's the third practical step? It seems to address what happens when this examination actually exposes flaws.
Yes. Step 3 is assessing our response to correction. When flaws are exposed, maybe through JEHOVAH's word, through counsel from others, maybe even through difficult circumstances, how do we actually receive that chastisement?
How we react to being told we're wrong, basically.
Essentially, yes. The source quotes Hebrews 12:6 directly. Whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth.
So correction is a sign of love, of sonship.
Exactly. The examined heart, the heart that has begun to slay pride, receives this rebuke, this correction with humility. And humility is defined as lowliness, meekness, modesty. It accepts the correction.
And the alternative?
The alternative is the arrogance that led the cistern maker to cover his crack. That arrogance resists correction, it gets defensive, it behaves like the stiff-necked house of Israel, often described in the scriptures, who refuse instruction. So correction is reframed here. It's not rejection. It's actually a sign of covenant acceptance and refinement.
It really is the ultimate test of whether pride has truly been slain, isn't it? If pride is still alive and kicking, correction will inevitably lead to defensiveness or justification.
Precisely. Which brings us to the fourth and final practical step outlined. Faithfulness in small things.
Faithfulness in the little things.
Yes. The source quotes Luke 16:10 directly. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much.
Okay, how does that relate to FirstFruits?
The teaching is that the true first fruit, offering the real state of our character, the depth of our devotion, isn't primarily revealed in the big, grand public gestures or vows we might make.
Right.
It's actually revealed much more accurately in the daily, seemingly insignificant stewardship of what seems little. How do we handle minor tasks or responsibilities? How do we treat people in positions considered lower than ours? How do we manage the smallest allocations of our time or resources when no one is watching? That is where the unvarnished truth of the heart is really tested and shown.
That makes sense. The small things add up to the big picture. So this whole sequence, slaying pride, examining devotions, responding humbly to correction, being faithful in the small things, it all leads back to the crucial function of that fire we talked about. If the examination exposes these flaws, the fire, which the source defines spiritually as desire, glory, zeal, consuming, has to be applied. How does this fire manage to both consume the bad and preserve the good simultaneously?
It's presented as having multiple vital functions in the life of the follower, the living first fruit. First, as we said, it burns away the self-deception, the pretense, the dross of pride.
Yeah.
Clears it out.
Balance the bad.
Second, it actually kindles fresh zeal and desire where maybe complacency or spiritual apathy is set in. It reignites the passion.
Stirs things up.
Exactly. And third, it consumes the false offerings, the offerings made out of pride or obligation, allowing only the pure offering of genuine humility and sincere devotion to remain.
And crucially, this same fire preserves what is pure, right? How is pure defined?
Pure is defined as holy, clean, undefiled, sincere, honest. The fire doesn't destroy these qualities. It reveals and refines them, making them shine brighter. It makes them acceptable to Jehovah.
So it consumes and preserves.
Yes, and the source uses that powerful image from Malachi 3:2-3 again, depicting Jehovah sitting patiently like a refiner and purifier of silver, watching the process intently.
Why is the sitting part important?
Because the refiner has to sit and watch the metal constantly. They have to control the heat carefully. They know the process is complete only when they can see their own image perfectly reflected in the surface of the pure, molten silver. Wow. So the fire of examination and trial is ultimately about preparation and purification. It's Jehovah refining us until we perfectly reflect his image, his character. That's what makes us acceptable as his living first works, his true first fruits.
That discussion on the refiner's fire and Jehovah sitting and watching until his image is reflected, that brings us quite naturally to the second major dark speech or parable in the source material, the parable of the hedged vineyard.
Yes, another very deep similitude.
And this one seems to directly connect suffering, affliction, everyday trials directly to this necessary process of examination and refinement we've been discussing.
It really does. It offers one of the most, I think, transformative interpretations of affliction presented in this material. It starts with a man planting his vineyard.
Okay, standard enough.
But then he hedges it round about. And here's the twist. The hedge isn't made of stone or thorns or wood, like you'd expect to keep animals or thieves out.
Right. What's it made of?
Metaphorically, it's made of the coats of skin that Jehovah had woven back in Genesis 3:21 after the fall.
Coats of skin representing mortality.
Exactly. Representing mortality are human limitations and the afflictions that inevitably come with this mortal existence.
That is a profound connection. We usually think of a hedge purely as protection from the outside. But here, the source is identifying the protection as our very mortality and the troubles that come with it. That sounds counterintuitive.
It does at first glance.
Yeah.
But the source material presents this hedge, this condition of mortality and affliction, not as a punishment or confinement, but actually as an act of mercy and divine protection.
How is affliction protection?
Because it shields the seed of promise, the potential for spiritual growth within the follower, from being completely overrun by the corruption of the world or destroyed by unchecked self-glorification. It keeps us grounded, keeps us dependent. The trials we face, the limitations of our flesh, are presented as necessary boundary markers, keeping us within the vineyard where growth under Jehovah's care can happen, forcing us into that place of dependence and ongoing examination.
So affliction itself is framed as a protective tool, keeping us in the right place for growth. And this leads to the next stage in the parable, the season of testing. This inevitably brings the covenant people into the, what's it called, the winepress of affliction.
Yes, the winepress, where sorrow and pain crush them, just like grapes are crushed.
Okay, let's think about a winepress. The crushing isn't gentle, it's violent, it's absolute. Grapes are essentially destroyed in their original form to release their essence, the juice.
The parallel drawn is incredibly clear and direct. The sorrow and pain of life's trials, the afflictions Jehovah allows, they crush the flesh. They crush the ego. They crush that self-sufficiency we keep trying to rely on.
The very dross the refiner's fire was meant to separate.
Exactly. It's another aspect of the same purification process. But here's the crucial insight, the unexpected outcome. The source says that in this very crushing, this pressing, children of the Spirit are born.
Children of the Spirit.
Yes. Souls are refined through suffering. Character is forged. We are pressed into Jehovah's likeness through the very trials that seem designed to destroy us. The winepress is where the pure spiritual essence, the wine, is extracted and actually multiplied. It turns the raw, maybe even bitter fruit into something precious. Spiritual maturity, depth of character. The source insists these only come through the intensity of that pressing.
That's a powerful reframing of suffering. Now, this leads to a critical question the source says the priest asks when examining the offering. He doesn't just look at the fruit itself. He asks to see the winepress where the offering was prepared. Why is the place of preparation, the place of suffering, so important?
Because the teaching is that the most precious wine, meaning the purest spiritual output, the most effective first works, the deepest character comes only through that crushing process. A follower who hasn't been pressed, who hasn't endured trials and submitted to the refinement they bring, hasn't yet yielded their greatest potential, their richest offering.
So the suffering itself adds value to the offering.
It's integral to its quality, yes. And for those who endure that pressing, who remain faithful through the winepress experience, there's a tremendous promise mentioned. What's the promise?
Yes, for those proven faithful in the winepress, the source speaks of a double portion and double honor, citing Isaiah 61:7 specifically.
Double portion and double honor. What does that mean spiritually?
It's presented not just as a reward like getting extra stuff, it signifies spiritual multiplication. The mystery revealed here is that the winepress, the place of affliction, isn't ultimately punishment. It's intensive preparation. It's the place where the spiritual seed within the believer actually multiplies exponentially through the suffering, producing these children of the covenant, mature spiritual fruit, which are then presented back to Jehovah as a double blessing, a multiplied return on his investment.
Wow.
The soul that submits to the hedge of mortality and the press of affliction becomes paradoxically exponentially fruitful in the things that matter to the covenant.
Okay, so this whole process of examination, the altar, the slaying, the fire, the winepress, it sounds relentless. It's designed to expose flaws. So what happens if the mirror of the altar, the honest examination, reveals failure? If the cistern is cracked, if the fruit being produced is sour or insufficient, what's Jehovah's immediate response according to the source? And then critically, what is the required response from the worshiper to restore their covenant standing?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? What happens when we fail the audit? Jehovah's response, consistent with the covenant relationship described, is defined not as immediate final destruction or abandonment, thank goodness.
Right.
It's defined as correction.
Okay.
And correction here means instruction, reproof, chastisement, discipline.
Okay, correction, not condemnation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's presented as the loving, purposeful discipline of a father towards a chosen son or daughter who is meant to inherit, who is meant to be refined into the family likeness. The fire of correction is intended to purge the flaw, not destroy the vessel itself.
That's reassuring. So if Jehovah's response is correction, what is the proper, the non-negotiable response required from the follower? What must we do?
The only acceptable response outlined is genuine repentance. And repentance is defined deeply here as a change of mind, turning, transformation. It's not just feeling sorry.
A change of direction.
A complete change of direction. It specifically excludes defensiveness, trying to negotiate the terms, and absolutely forbids self-justification.
And the source gives an example of this, right?
Yeah. Yes. The foundational example provided is King David. Remember when the prophet Nathan confronted him about his terrible hidden sin with Bathsheba and Uriah?
Mm-hmm.
David didn't argue about the legal technicalities. He didn't make excuses about being king or being tempted. His immediate response, recorded in 2 Samuel 12:13, was simple and total. I have sinned against the Lord. Full stop.
No caveats.
No caveats. And that immediate, unvarnished confession opened the door for Jehovah's pardon and his eventual spiritual restoration, even though consequences remained.
So confession is the necessary starting point.
Yeah.
But does it end there? Does honest examination require more than just saying sorry?
It absolutely must translate into corresponding tangible action. Just confessing isn't enough if the behavior doesn't change. This leads directly to the vital concept of restitution.
Restitution, making things right.
Exactly. Defined as restoration compensation. This is presented as the real litmus test of true repentance. If you broke something, you fix it. If you took something, you give it back, and then some.
Is there an example for this too?
The prime example used is Zacchaeus from the New Testament writings. Interestingly, the source notes that the name Zacchaeus spiritually means pure. When salvation of Jehovah entered his house, Zacchaeus' life underwent this intense examination, and he realized his errors as a tax collector. His response wasn't just, I'm sorry. He publicly declared, as recorded in Luke 19:8, that he would give half his goods to the poor, and if he had defrauded anyone, he would restore it fourfold.
Fourfold. That's significant compensation.
It is. The lesson is crystal clear. The internal honest examination must lead to external, legal, and spiritual consequences that actually affect our material life and our relationships. The spiritual honesty has to translate into tangible change and correction. That's what solidifies the covenant relationship, matching our actions to our confession.
This whole system, it really demonstrates this powerful, inseparable fusion of the spiritual life and the law, doesn't it? It's not one or the other.
Exactly. And the source material actually generates some specific, unique perceptual terms to capture this tight integration of internal assessment and external obedience. They're like spiritual, legal portmanteaus.
Yeah. Let's hear them.
Let's spend a moment on these four terms because they really summarize the integrated nature of the spiritual walk described here. The first one is truth offering.
Truth offering. What does that fuse?
It fuses the honest assessment of the self, that complete laying bare of the soul we talked about, with the legal requirement of bringing an acceptable sacrifice or offering. The point is, you cannot have the sacrifice accepted without the absolute truth of the heart being laid upon that altar alongside it. The truth is what ultimately sanctifies the offering.
Okay. Truth makes the offering valid. What's the second term?
Second, heart examination. This one fuses the spiritual center of our being, the heart, as the source of all thought, motivation, and devotion, with the legal process of investigation, the command to search and try our ways according to the law. It's applying Jehovah's legal standard directly to our unseen internal motivations.
Applying the law to the heart's motives. Got it. Third.
Third is fire purification. This merges the consuming nature of divine judgment, that zealous fire of Jehovah that burns away the dross, with the legal requirement found in the law for ceremonial and, by extension, internal cleansing. It acknowledges that the fire of trial and examination is actually necessary to make the follower legally pure and acceptable before Jehovah.
So the fire serves a legal purification purpose too.
Yeah.
And the last one?
And finally, covenant faithfulness. This directly combines the legal binding of our agreement, our covenant with Jehovah, with the essential spiritual quality of unwavering devotion, consistency, and steadfastness. It says our faithfulness isn't just a feeling, it's a legal commitment demonstrated over time.
Truth offering, heart examination, fire purification, covenant faithfulness. Those four terms really do encapsulate this integrated path, don't they? An examined, purified life lived out in constant, faithful devotion to the law. That is the true first fruit offering.
Precisely, which brings us full circle back to the essential conclusion of the entire source material. After all this examination, all this refining, what offering does Jehovah ultimately accept when we present ourselves at that altar?
It can't be flawless performance, can it? Because the scriptures are clear, only salvation of Jehovah is flawless.
Exactly. So what is accepted?
What is accepted, according to this teaching, is a truthful, examined heart laid bare. The acceptable first fruits offering is measured by the sincerity of the examination itself and the completeness of the surrender to that process. That's the offering that requires the most from us, far more than just bringing produce.
Sincerity and surrender.
Yes. It ultimately confirms that ancient truth, spoken to the prophet Samuel in 1 Samuel 16:7, that Jehovah looks not on the outward appearance or the height of the stature. He looks upon the heart. The examined, surrendered heart. #outro.
Wow. This has been an incredibly detailed and I think challenging deep dive. We started by looking at first fruits as, maybe a simple harvest ritual, and we've ended up exploring a profound ongoing spiritual assessment where we ourselves are the living offering, constantly being refined by an internal fire, continually tested against the standard of the law, and even pressed and purified by the very trials and afflictions we often try so desperately to avoid.
Indeed. The ultimate takeaway seems to be that first fruits is not really about the fruit of the field, but the fruit of examination. It's a season, yes, but it represents a constant demand that every follower confront the inward truth, purge the hidden deceit, and actively become a vessel fit for Jehovah's use. The examined soul is the true offering. The surrendered heart is the acceptable first fruit, the one ready for that double portion of honor and fruitfulness.
So, for you listening right now, as you reflect on all this, and particularly on that powerful similitude of the broken cisterns, that master craftsman whose 40-year success story was ultimately ruined by hidden vanity, consider this provocation. What is the flaw in your own spiritual labor? In your core devotion, perhaps in your habits, maybe in your relationships? What is the crack that you might be tempted, even subtly, to patch over with the cheap clay of justification or pretense or just plain denial, hoping nobody, maybe not even Jehovah, will notice, rather than laying it bare before the sometimes painful but ultimately purifying and refining process of Jehovah's examination? Because according to this teaching, that decision to hide or to reveal for healing defines whether your works, your life offering, will stand or ultimately fail.
Yeah. We committed to that life. JEHOVAH war. Yeah. Who is this? Who has no knowledge of King James Bible University, the house of Jehovah, our servants? Who steps into a den where lions pity none, hyenas, wolves, or serpents that slither in? This ain't the place for the faint or the fake. For the law, here cuts to marrow when mercy bows to truth. Elder Michael Johnson, false doctrine killer. Retired more men than social security, slain more false teachings than wars have slain soldiers. A walking legend in this day. Bound to spirit, moving only in covenant command. When he speaks, it's scripture with scripture, precept on precept, spirit with spirit, no flesh, no vain opinion. IUI, COC, and these so-called elders of Israel have all felt the wrath of Jehovah's servants. We can't stop and we won't stop until Jehovah's work is done. Bison flows east with gold for the righteous, but drowns rebels in its current. Havila's land stands blessed, untouchable to the proud. The onyx stone seals verdicts. No plea, no deal, no escape. These three tokens rise when the elder speaks. Jehovah's court is in session. Crowds gather with their doctrines and banners, boasting they will prevail, but they see only man and miss the Nuclean daylight. The scroll bright in Elder Johnson's hand, every statute a hammer, every judgment a spear forged in heaven's fire. The mount is his post, the valley is trial ground. Wolves creep in shadows, but find a snare at their feet. He's retired pastors with no call. Silence prophets of vanity, crushed pulpits built on sand. He uproots lies from the root, not with rage, but with the precise cut of the word. He doesn't chase the debate, he opens the book and lets truth put him on trial. The courtroom has no walls, the shofar sounds, precepts align like soldiers. Counterfeit breaks under spirit's weight, Pison confirms him, Havila agrees. Onyx records, the fool who enters with a slogan leaves with chains. The wolf that stalks leaves toothless, the serpent that hisses leaves crushed in the call of the law. Jehovah alone is shepherd, but Elder Johnson is the feeder sent to guard the flock. A daylight warhead, too bright to touch, too heavy to move. His Bible is the sun at full strength, burning away deceit until nothing false remains. So hear the parable. Who is this stepping unlearned into the house of Jehovah's servants? Who dares walk into a den where lions pity none, hyenas, wolves, or serpents that crawl in? IUI, COC, and the elders of Israel have felt this fire. We can't stop, we won't stop until Jehovah's work is done. Touch not the feeder, war with him, and you war with the throne. Hassan will test you, Havila will weigh you, Onyx will seal you. This is biblical suicide, your own hand the knife, your own name cut from the book of life. Elder Michael Johnson walks on, law in hand, judgment in step, a legend in Jehovah's service. The house of the servant stands, the lines are hungry, and there is no pity here.